to give thanks to the Creator and for bringing us all here together in a good way. And so, with that, I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples from coast to coast to coast, including all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Here, where I am at in Calgary, I am on the traditional territories of the Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, our Tsuut'ina people, which is a Dene people, and the Stoney Nakoda people of Morley. So I'd just like to always acknowledge that we are on traditional territories of our Indigenous peoples. So with that, I'd like to welcome everyone to our panel discussion on climate change and the important roles that Indigenous knowledge plays in Alberta's sustainable future. And when we talk about climate change, everyone has their own interpretation, their own definition, their own personal experiences, and what that means to you and to them, or to you and your family, your communities. I just want to set the stage by saying, for me, climate change refers to a persistent change in climate conditions, either temperatures or precipitation, but that happens over a long period of time in a large region. And that could be years, it could be decades. When my mother, our aunts, our elders, our relations talk about what it used to be like way back when they were either remembering and telling stories about their snowfalls, how the snowfalls used to be so deep it would be up to the eaves trough of the trap line. That accumulation of snow doesn't happen anymore. My aunts used to talk about going berry picking, and now those berries aren't there. Those bushes aren't flourishing like they used to in a certain area. So now they're having to go farther or to a different location to go berry picking. For myself, if I have to go pick medicinal, and those aren't there anymore due to flooding or to dryness, that is climate change to me. And this impacts our communities, our reserves, our nations. And this is what I'm putting out there for you, is that climate change, make it personal relative to you, because you're going to have your own definitions and your own interpretation of climate change. And just what we were saying, we respect all of that. So at this time, I am so excited to have a couple of mentors, a couple of people that I really look up to. I'm very proud to have them in my friendship circle. And we are so honored to have these two gentlemen with us on our panel today. So at this time, I would like to introduce Desmond Bull to you and Paul McLaughlin. But having said that, I would really love I'll ask Desmond to go first, to really introduce yourself, Desmond, please, and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, your experience.
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Brad. Good morning to all the attendees across this nation. I'm very honored and very proud to be a part of this panel and have a talk on discussion. I think this is a very important discussion. I'm very glad to be a part of this. My name is Desmond Bull. I'm from the Lewis Bull tribe of the Musqueam Nation of the Treaty 6 territory of Alberta. A little background, I worked in education for 12 years. After that, I went into politics. I've been doing that for the past 8 years. Currently, I'm still a counselor for my tribe, but I also do other work outside my tribe, which includes I created a partnership with my friend in regards to addressing capacity development in the renewable sector, and also work on consultation and duly consult between the industry, government, and First Nations. Plus, I'm also Alberta Green Party advisory shadow cabinet for the Indigenous relations, and I also work with David Mearner at the international level, federal level, with the Green Party of Canada also. So I'm very happy to be involved in all this type of work, and I'll definitely speak a little bit more in regards to type of networking and opportunities that allowed me to partake in this type of conversation. And I think Brad brought up a really good point. You know, climate change, it impacts everyone. You know, it really has no boundaries in how it should be addressed. It doesn't see no nationalities, it doesn't see borders, it doesn't see no social class, it doesn't see no work class. You know, I think climate change is still a really big issue. You know, and as though we're dealing with this pandemic during COVID here, you know, I honestly believe that climate change is still a very important issue and should be addressed once we pass this darkness of this pandemic that we're in right now. You know, and I think one thing we can take away from this pandemic is the approach and how the international community looked at COVID, and how everybody in every country, it didn't matter nationality or country or border, that everybody agreed that they had to take a stance in regards to how they wanted to address that. And I'm hoping in a future, when as we address climate change, we can look at it through the same lens as how we looked at COVID as an international community and addressing it as an international, so everybody's on board, very similar to how we dealing with this pandemic at this time. But again, thank you, Brad. Thank everybody, Eco Canada and Bear, for allowing me to speak, and I'm definitely looking forward to the conversations between all of us here and feedback from the group. Again, hi, thank you.
Again, thank you, Desmond. On a personal note, we're very honored to have Desmond here with us today. He's been working for his nation for a long time, and I've had the pleasure of working with Desmond in the past, and he's very sincere, he's very knowledgeable, he's very respectful. We're very honored to have Desmond with us today. And I'd like to introduce Paul McLaughlin to you today, another expert, another great friend. We're so honored and lucky to have Paul. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little about yourself as well.
You bet. Well, thank you, Brad, and thank you for your prayer. And I do honor the traditional territories by which the people of Canada are sharing with me. So I do appreciate that. And it's great to be on a panel with the rock star Desmond Bull. He's a fantastic leader, and I would even use the word legend. So it's great to be on a panel with him. And I'm actually neighbors to the Louis Bull Nation. I'm actually the Reeve of Ponoka County, and I'm actually on my hopefully on my 5th term as a municipal leader in Ponoka County, and I've been a Reeve for quite a bit of time too as well, and I have a fantastic relationship. And I do want to comment, the Musqueam Nation's response to COVID has been beyond amazing. They have really showed what a community is, and they've really taken this on. It's a very tough situation we're in. But I'm also president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta too as well. So I represent all the rural municipalities in the province of Alberta, all the councils and all the I think it's exciting to bring that lens as well. But I've been a professional biologist now for longer than I haven't. So actually I'm at about 26 years as a professional biologist. And I've had the privilege of working with knowledge holders in the communities all across Western Canada and across Canada. I've had the privilege of actually experiencing traditional knowledge and the knowledge system and the lens by which Indigenous people see the world. And I think that I've also been involved with solar projects, environmental monitoring, and those type of activities that are related to climate change. And I think this is an exciting time. I think as Desmond has mentioned, COVID has put a focus on what's important. And what's important is communities. What's important is having clean water, being self-sustainable and dealing with these climate issues. And I think it's become very important for us to work together. And I guess the message I bring to you is that I think this is an opportunity for partnership. What's come out of this difficulty is I do think that I'll bring a message to you that I think through partnership and cooperation, I think we can take on climate change together. Using the two knowledge systems, two worldviews is a fantastic opportunity for us to move forward and find the solutions to actually help each other. We both share the same space, the same world, and we need to work together to do that. And I'm quite honored by the elders and the experience I've had. And I do have a Western view. I'm a Western politician, and Scottish-Irish kind of guy, and so I do have a worldview, but the beauty is crossing those two boundaries and those two parallel worlds when they intersect. That's where amazingness happens, and I think we cannot take on climate change with a singular worldview. We need to share our view and share our energies, and so I'm very excited as well, and I think hopefully at the end of this, there's a call to action. I've been on multiple webinars, and they've been awesome, and I'm inspired. And if we can leave you with a call to action, how to connect, how to actually go forward and actually find solutions at the community level or greater, I think there's some fantastic opportunity. The biggest shift I've seen right now is the power in Indigenous communities is your youth. What an amazing group of people that are finding the solutions. They will be the ones that will find solutions to the problems we're in, and empowering your youth to be involved in sharing that knowledge system through your elders and your knowledge holders, I think is a fantastic opportunity to take on what's really a life or death situation, which is climate change. So I'm excited to be here, glad to be invited, and look forward to your questions and sharing some information with you. And I look forward to learning from you folks too as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. And again, we are so privileged and honored and thankful to have both of you on the panel today. So you brought up a good point, and just before I start the question period, I just wanted to bring some traditional knowledge in before we start asking these questions, and this is more for the audience. Land, language, culture, that equals our cultural identity. That is who we are as Indigenous people. You cannot break us into those sections. They are all interconnected and intertwined. And I think I just want to mention that so it sets the stage when we're having these conversations and talking or answering these questions today, that you look at that whole entire perspective, how everything is braided together: land, language, culture, our cultural identity as Indigenous people. So having said that, I'll start asking the questions for Desmond. What strategies, projects, opportunities, or initiatives have you implemented within the Indigenous climate change energy management space that may have provided a tangible, holistic outcomes? Please, share with us if you have any of those initiatives or what those outcomes were, why they were so important, and what challenges and successes have you experienced, Desmond?
Okay, thank you, Brad. That's a really excellent question. And I did take some notes on this, and so I do have some notes here I'd like to share here. But yeah, for me, first and foremost, like I said, before getting into politics, I worked in education for many years. I worked with kindergarten to grade 9 students. You know, I was very fortunate to be at that level and work with the youth in that capacity. So when I decided to make that shift into politics, it was very important for me that I take a good stance, and I'm a firm believer in never reinventing the wheel. I enjoy looking at best practices, best types of models. So during my term in first year in office, I approached my former chief and talked to him about what kind of opportunities we can explore for our tribe. And one of the ones that came forward was the renewable sector. And so with a little bit of research, I sat down with a group. We looked at some training programs. So me and one of my colleagues went away and did a 5-day installation training program and put about 10 kilowatts on a residential home. But that experience itself, you know, led opportunities to create that networking there, where Mike Udema from Greenpeace was actually on the same team in doing that installation. So he referred me to another group, the Green Economy Network in Edmonton. So I joined them. These were all voluntary. And from there, it went on to the Energy Futures Lab, where they allowed me, Energy Futures Lab gave me space to talk at Walrus Talks at the Royal Alberta. I was very fortunate. Minister Shannon Phillips was in the audience at the time, and she recruited me at that point to work on the Alberta Energy Efficiency Advisory Panel, which we created the report for the Alberta Climate Change Action Plan. So it kind of snowballed from there, you know, where I was able to join other groups such as the 2020 Catalyst program, also the Indigenous Climate Action Team, and I also sat as a board member for 2 years for Solar Alberta. But all those initiatives, you know, kind of allowed me to use this as a network to develop programs within my tribe. So we have very successfully installed 188 kilowatts on 7 of our public buildings. The training was done through our HR, our Human Resource Department, and all our buildings were through nonprofit organizations. So we were very fortunate to actually capture funding through grants, subsidies, partnerships with Iron and Earth to develop one of the programs. The other one was a new building design for our transfer station, where we incorporated 10 kilowatts on a field-mounted system as part of the initial design, which was accepted by our funders, and which kind of set a precedence where other First Nations that want a new building on First Nations have that opportunity to incorporate renewable components into that design of that building itself. So for me, it was very successful, where we are allowed to train our members on each program that started, if not have them continue to do the work on the installation of each project. And also with the training and background they have and experience, it allowed them to go out there and look at other opportunities where other PV programs may be starting, or solar installation programs might be available for them to look at. So I'm very happy to say we have 30 band members trained. That's including myself. We have, like I said, all the projects were done through partnerships, collaborations, donations. So my tribe was very fortunate in a way to allow me to access that type of funding, where we didn't use any capital from my tribe, but everything, the hardware, solar panels, are all owned by my tribe. So for me, that was a really great experience. And I think one of the more challenging things was, you know, it was fairly new to me. And as it was fairly new to me and a lot of First Nations, I was very happy to kind of set that precedence, and allowed other First Nations to you know, join, allowed me to share my story with them, to inspire them to move in that direction. So my neighbors, they actually moved forward and installed a couple of megawatt systems of solar in Montana Tribe and Ermskin. I'm very happy for them. But it's that type of snowball effect that really inspired and moved a lot of First Nations to really take a serious look at renewable energy and energy efficiency. Thank you. That was a great question, Brad.
Thank you. And we are so proud of all the work that you and Louis Bull have done in this space, and you continue to be leaders in that space. So thank you. Same question, Paul, if I could put that forward to you. What strategies, projects, opportunities, or initiatives have you implemented within the Indigenous climate change or energy management space? And please, again, elaborate more about your initiatives, or what were the outcomes and why they were so important to you, and the challenges and successes that you experienced.
You bet. Well, thanks, Brad. And I won't. I'm not going to follow the PV, the solar panel conversation. Other than I do want to say that I'm in a building right now in Nisku, and we have solar panels that are 20 years old and still providing energy. So all the naysayers of solar panels, oh, when are these going to go to the landfill? I'm looking at these solar panels right now, and they're not going to the landfill for another 20 years. So I'm actually, we're being powered right now from one of the oldest solar installations in central Alberta. But I'll talk a little bit more about what my grandfather taught me. And my grandfather taught me the only person that take care of you is you. And I want to talk a little bit about climate change monitoring, and actually empowerment of Indigenous communities to be involved in monitoring and be involved with that mitigation and that response. Mother Earth needs some help, but at the same time, I think nations have the opportunities to actually start to collect that data and provide that observational data to be able to see the early indications of what's happening, what's going on in our communities, what's going on in your traditional territories. And I'm working with a couple of communities right now on that and we're actually empowering the youth and the members from the community to create a network where they're monitoring their water, monitoring their soil, looking at their vegetation, looking at their wildlife, and looking at how climate change, how those changes are occurring, providing that baseline data, and providing some opportunity to have that discussion around whether they can repair or heal Mother Earth. And the fantastic part about that is that's a bridging exercise. It's bridging the Western science worldview to the Indigenous knowledge, and it's allowing the youth to have an opportunity to work with their elders and then take that knowledge system and apply it on the ground. And I think the biggest challenge is sort of that bureaucratic Western science worldview where is this data valid? Is this data useful? And the fact is that if you can start to bridge that and determine what that information is, I think that there's some opportunities there to actually share that information, actually to provide better advice as we move forward. And I think that the whole outcomes from this data is that the nation is now empowered. And again, stepping back from what my grandfather said, the only person to take care of you, is that the communities are at an advantage that within their traditional territories, if they're holding this data and they're reflecting on this data based on the knowledge and the information within your community, that's empowerment. And I think that going down the road of reconciliation and dealing with UNDRIP, I think one of the biggest things to do is actually look at the empowerment conversation. And I think it's quite exciting. So these communities are establishing long-term cumulative effects monitoring programs, and there's tremendous opportunities out right now between federal government funding and those type of programs. And I think that it's exciting, and the youth are excited. The youth are excited because they can work in their community, they can work on behalf of their nation, and they can actually take it on. I think probably the biggest challenge is getting started. The challenge is that some of these members need to understand that the knowledge that your community has is so powerful and is so important, and the solutions are found within your community. And we just need to work together to find those solutions. And I think that the successes is really found is in the pride that the communities have been involved with these monitoring programs. And so there's multiple programs going on right now. The youth are getting on the ground, they're getting training, and Bear and Nico Canada is a perfect example of providing that capacity training, the understanding at the same time. I think that the biggest challenge is making sure that people understand that the knowledge system that the communities have is so valuable to the conversations we're having on climate change.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. That was fantastic. If I could move on to the next question here. Desmond, what does Indigenous-led climate action mean to you? And what does traditional knowledge mean to you? And how does that play a part in sustainable climate change and energy management solutions? And for you, Desmond, how do you see Western science supporting Indigenous knowledge when seeking these climate change solutions?
Thank you, Brad, for another great question there. I think talking with Corey yesterday about this question gave me a lot to think about. And, for me, I think participating in some of the groups, I was very fortunate to bring an elder along, my uncle, Jonathan Bull. And I would listen to speak to these climate groups and these environment groups, and he draws that connection to how ancestral practices of our ancestors were connected very closely to Mother Earth and the Creator, and that understanding that everything is circular, and that's how we need to address that climate change issue, that everything is interconnected, and that we're all related in some way or form to the air, to the water we breathe, to the land we walk on, and I think, we're not above those type of natural laws, but we should be in partnership with them. And that goes so much further with that understanding that, we as First Nations, I don't like to say it, but we were actually probably one of the first true environmentalists ever. So I think we do have hundreds and thousands of years of practice that we have accumulated that is through generational, that we have an understanding. And I think making that collaboration and making it work with Western science is very effective. And I just want to share a story here. In Louis Bull Tribe, one of the projects we did was with Iron and Earth. Iron and Earth is a group that takes oil and gas workers and reskills them in the renewable sector. So one of my friends, Liam Hildebrand, he was the president of that group. We sat down through Energy Futures Lab and developed a program in Louis Bull. So what we did was he brought 10 oil and gas workers. I brought some Musqueam workers to work alongside of them. There was 15 in total. And it was a 5-day program on Louis Bull Tribe. And it ended with an 8-kilowatt installation on our daycare. Now, one of the great things about this program that actually happened was, within my community, we always have a ceremony to begin, whether it's a prayer or elder or a pipe ceremony. I was very fortunate to get a cultural advisor to come down and do a pipe ceremony with us. Now, one of the great things that happened about that was all the participants, I asked them, you guys are more than welcome to come join in the pipe ceremony or sit in a circle. I told them I'm not trying to sway your beliefs or any of your thoughts. It's a good experience. And sure enough, pretty much everybody sat in a circle. And for a lot of these people in this group, they never experienced, the immersion of actually sitting in a pipe ceremony, the listening to the elders. It was so enlightening to that group that never had that experience. it really inspired them. So we, throughout the rest of the week, as the cultural advisor was there, he offered a sweat ceremony also. All 15 participants almost showed up. I think 3 of them got lost. But you know, it was that immersion that really showed the importance of how partnerships can be made within a Western understanding and traditional practices. And it was so amazing to see these group of men, and including one woman, that took that opportunity to be a part of that pipe ceremony, to be a part of that the sweat. You know, so much so that a few of the participants didn't shower till after the program was over, because they felt so enlightened in being part of that. And that just goes a long ways in regards to how we want to view everything in regards to Canada. And I think that works very great toward the initiative of truth and reconciliation, of creating partnership, having that cultural integration. You know, you can learn and read about or watch videos about First Nations people, but unless you're immersed in it and actually experience it, you're totally missing out on what is available. And I'm hoping in the future, you know, Canada will embrace more of the truth and reconciliation and allow the proper history of First Nations people to be understood and shared within this country through curriculum development. And I think a consultation practice with the elders and educators alike to develop that curriculum would be amazing. I mean, we consider French as a second language here. Wouldn't it be amazing in the territory to have that second language be Cree or Blackfoot or any of the other First Nations in this amazing country that have that? And I think the great thing about developing a curriculum like that, it'll diversify what individuals and tribes and nations are within that area itself. Like myself, you know, I'm a Cree, and just south of me are the Blackfoots, just to north of me are the Métis. So there's that diversification of First Nations people where we all ain't painted with the same brush. But if there's one thing that I just want to say about this is the fact that my partner, Liam, in regards to creating that program, we proved it can be done. We can prove that cultural immersion can be part of an education curriculum development. And we proved that actually non-First Nations people will gravitate and definitely take a part in something like that. So I'm very fortunate. I'm very happy that we're going to be continuing this program again with our local post-secondary college in Maskwacis. And we're hoping to have that project done here by the end of fall. So with that being said, you know, I'm never one to reinvent the wheel. I love the program that was done. It's an amazing pilot, an amazing mold, and I'm hoping it evolves into something where it becomes a post-secondary accredited program. Thank you for that question, Brad. Great question.
Hi, thank you for sharing all that fantastic information. That's amazing. Paul, same question, but how do you see traditional knowledge supporting Western science when working towards climate solutions?
Yeah, thanks, Brad, and appreciate Desmond's response as well. And I've had the fortune of being in a sweat in Maskwacis, and because they know I was the Riva Panoka County, they threw on an extra couple of rocks to try to give me a little bit extra heat. So I toughed it out, but I'll tell you, I was definitely cleansed after the extra rocks. They told me after they threw a few extra rocks, but you know, the terminology that's existing right now is regeneration, is connectedness. We're using holistic farming, regenerative farming, circular economy. These are languages that are part of the world knowledge and the knowledge system that Indigenous communities have. And you can see that we're starting to get the term as consilience, is the crossing over of those knowledge systems into Western science. And I think that the fact is that I'm a Western science trained guy. So what I do is I compartmentalize things. I list things. I'm into listing. I put things in buckets. I sort and I gather and I create hierarchy. That's how I see the world. And I worked with Indigenous communities and have the privilege of working with elders and knowledge holders. And I'm always stretched to look at the broad view, which I think is the beauty and the connectedness of what Indigenous people bring to the world view. And my science in isolation is hierarchical. It's not connected. It's not putting those lines together. It's not dealing with regeneration. It's not dealing with healing. It's not using those words properly. And so when I start to see the world in the view of the traditional knowledge holders and that knowledge is there, then I start to understand what healing is. I start to understand connectedness. I start understanding what science can know and doesn't know. And it also allows you to start to actually second guess the certainty that's sometimes communicated by Western science, that really it's not actually providing that whole message or that whole story. And I'll give you a great example. I was a young biologist, and I was working in the Athabasca Delta, and I had these fantastic maps done up. And the maps were actually looking at populations of muskrat and lynx. So we're looking at impacts of climate change in the Bennett Dam on the Athabasca Delta. And these were the most beautiful maps you've ever seen. I was so proud of these maps. And so we showed up in the community and we're rolling out the maps because we were working for the community. And I was talking with the elders and saying, look at my maps. Like, these are awesome maps. These are the best maps ever. And we're wanting to actually lay out where we thought the lynx habitat would be and how that's being impacted by the Delta. And the elder looks at my maps and he says, those are nice maps. He goes, but why do you have a spot here that the lynx aren't using? And I said, well, lynx don't like water. So we've only used sort of the upland areas. And the elder said, so do you think a lynx that's hunting muskrat in the Athabasca Delta isn't swimming in the water? He said, just to be clear, the lynx in the Athabasca Delta swim, and they like to swim because if they can't swim, they're not catching muskrat. And I quickly realized that, the fact is that I come in thinking I know more than I know. And I think the best message I ever had, I use it to this day as a politician and as I move forward, is I had an elder stop me one time when I was telling about all the great things that I thought of the world. And they said, you know what, young man, if you're talking, you're not listening. And you need to actually sometimes listen once in a while. And I think that's what I'd probably offer out to you folks, is that really the opportunity is to listen, to incorporate this traditional knowledge, this amazing knowledge system. If everybody takes the time to listen and not tell, I think that we can actually start to find climate change solutions that I think will address, as I said earlier, issues that we're all being subjected to. And I'm very, very excited that these messages are starting to happen. And I'll come back to the call to action is that partnerships, relationships, and collaboration, I think that is the only way we can get to climate-based solutions or climate solutions. And the only way you can do that is by supporting TK and having Western science supporting TK and working together to find solutions.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. I just wanted to comment, so far throughout the last couple questions, you have always mentioned and incorporated and thanked all the elders from the communities, or all the elders that you have worked with. So I just wanted to say thank you to all those elders and their roles that they played. So how can government, industry, Indigenous nations, NGOs, academic institutions, and all others collaborate within this space? Understanding the challenges, where do you see the opportunities for collaboration? What does successful collaboration look like? Where does one start if they're wanting to start that collaboration? What's the action steps? How do they address current gaps? Desmond, what do you think?
Again, thank you, Brad, for another excellent question. Excuse me. So I think a good starting point for all of us in Canada, including First Nations, is to first thing we probably want to think of, okay, let's form an agreement that'll actually set a precedent and foundation that'll actually create this type of agreement, partnership, collaboration, so you say. But for me, I think that agreement is already in place, and it's called a treaty. I honestly believe that we are all treaty people, and as treaties are signed with Canadian citizens and the Canadian people alike, Canadian citizens should have that opportunity to express and be a part of that treaty. That includes the part to consultation on the lands, have that opportunity to human rights to education, the human right to health, and be proper, and be part of that treaty understanding where, the development and the project and resource sharing within this country should be unifying us together under this type of agreement, so we can share the prosperity of what this country has to offer, but also work toward proper reclamation and remediation, where once the project came to fruition, we work on proper reclamation and remediation so we can return the lands to the pristine ways that they were. So for me, I think, if we want to look at it, where to start or where can we start, I think the treaties is a perfect foundation and agreement for all of us to begin at. And I'm very happy, that within our own treaty, within Treaty 6 here, we have a pestilence and pestilence clause, which actually protected us, due to COVID out here. So Like I said, I think if we want to look at agreements, we already have some in place. The treaty's a perfect one. The Truth and Reconciliation is another one. The United Declaration of Indigenous People is another one. I think those are all great agreements that we can build a foundation on. But I think if we want to look at energy efficiency and community development, I think we got to look at a much more bigger scale of how we want to cultivate energy. And I honestly believe the best formula could be creating a megawatt systems that include partnerships with First Nations, surrounding municipalities, getting industry on board, getting the government on board, allowing shares of that project to be sold to the local public in the area. There's nothing more great than pride of ownership, knowing that you created and helped build something that is actually going to contribute to your community and your neighbors alike. So, I think that could be a good space to actually begin in regards to cultivating that type of energy and sharing it among the First Nations and the communities itself. I think this is not nothing new. I believe they've been practicing this type of work in Norway, where all energy programs are actually allowed to be to the public. So I believe that would be a great start there. Just look at the agreements that are already in place and build off those agreements, and then work toward some energy cultivation projects. But toward the end, it's not only about renewable energy and energy efficiency. I think working toward food sovereignty programs, water protection, transportation, waste management, environmental stewardship. There's so much that can be worked toward in regards to partnership, that it shouldn't be only a First Nation or a province or a federal initiative or an industry initiative. I think at the end of the day, it's that climate change issue that we all need addressed together and collectively. We're all in this together. Thank you.
Right. That's right. Well phrased, Desmond. Thank you so much. Paul, same question.
It's always hard to follow Desmond. He says just amazing stuff. One of the things that I think I can bring to the table is that I agree with everything he's saying, and I think that we've got these arbitrary lines on a map, and I'll go step back to the treaty discussion. Arbitrary lines on a map that define the community you live in, or the county, or the town, or your reserve boundaries, all those. And the fact is that you're exactly right, Desmond. We're all in this together, and then the fact is that it's those networks and partnerships, I think, are where the opportunities lie. And purchase powers agreements, so installing a solar installation on reserve and actually having the local municipality actually doing a PPA or power purchase agreements. There's opportunities there to drive that forward, and then co-management of those facilities and co-op power and all these discussions. If there's one thing COVID has taught us, is that self-reliance has gotten so important. Food poverty, disparity, all these conversations have become very important. I've had people try to buy my laying hens off me for large sums of money during COVID because I've got eggs every day. And the fact is that independence, I think, is quite critical to all of us. When you look at success of programs, activities, projects, networks is really what the difference is. So you can have the smartest person in the world with no network, and their success is very limited. But when you bring someone to the table that has a network, that's where you start to find solutions. And the reason why I bring up networks is, like, if I'm looking at NGOs, I'm working with a couple of NGOs on bridging their relationship with Indigenous people, having Indigenous input on what NGO projects are doing. And it's as simple as it sounds. My first step always is, well, what you do is you call up the community and you say, hey, let's sit down and have a chat. Let's have a tea. Let's get to know one another. And the people I talk to are always concerned, well, what are the cultural protocols? And I'm always saying, just ask. It sounds simple, but just ask. Have that conversation. In order to find success together, the best thing to do is to start to talk. And maybe you just talk. Maybe you're not trying to find something for one another, just getting to know one another. And it sounds simplistic, but I think if we start to grow relationships that aren't based on projects, but based on relationships because we're with each other, we're beside each other, and we're sharing this climate change, and I'll call it crisis because I think it is a crisis. We're sharing that together. We're all going to be impacted by it, continuing on in the future. And I think that in order to do that, we need to look at these networks, the collaboration, and just to begin to talk. And we can connect the dots, and we can look for funding together. We can find solutions together. And I think that we can move forward through this crisis together. And I'll step back to what I said earlier. The only one that's going to take care of you is you. And the fact is if we take care of each other, then we might be able to take care of this crisis that we're dealing with.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Desmond. I think that is what we've showed here today, is that we are having that conversation. We're beginning those talks, and we're forming those relationships, sharing that knowledge, sharing our wisdom with each other. And I think we're doing that in a respectful manner. And I cannot thank both of you enough for your time, your expertise, your wisdom, your guidance. And thank you all for all that you are doing, not only for your communities, for our people, for our province of Alberta here. Thank you for being who you are and leaders in this space. So having said that, at this time, I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues, Corey Steen. Corey is our program manager, and she manages our BEAR program. And I'd like quickly for Corey to give us a little info on BEAR and do the quick recap, if you could.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brad and Desmond and Paul. It's been truly a beautiful conversation today. And where I was hoping to take the conversation for a few moments is a potential opportunity or a tangible route in which everyone here who's listening today can get involved. So what EcoCanada's Indigenous BEAR training program is to tie all of this climate change and energy management conversation together. It's environmental training and capacity training that is delivered in community and in partnership with Indigenous communities all across Canada. So it's an opportunity for industry, government, non-GOs, and nations to collaborate in an environmental climate change context. So the point of the program and the point of the training is that when Indigenous members participate in the training, they graduate with all of the cultural, technical, and soft hands-on skills that they need to secure employment. So the training is employment focused. But what's really, really beautiful about the program and what tends to leverage it above kind of a classic environmental training is that it is built on Indigenous ideology and it is very Indigenous led. So the Western science and the Indigenous knowledge framework are beautifully braided together. And how that looks is you have elders and you have knowledge holders co-facilitating with your environmental partners when the training is delivered. What I really want to touch on here is we have two brand new programs. One is focused for leadership to build that leadership in the environmental adaptation planning process and context when strategizing to build resiliency from a community standpoint. And there's another 1-week program that's built on supporting the conversation and building the technical skills within the community and within the group to engage, implement, develop, strategize, and work towards community-based energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, which is the climate change and energy management course that we've developed. So within the BEAR training program, we have 2 new courses. There's an opportunity for everyone here to get involved in the climate change space, and just one tiny little way to do that is to be building those partnerships and building those networks and building those collaboration through meaningful community-based capacity training. And BEAR is one tiny little beautiful opportunity that has cultivated that. We've had well over 270 trainings delivered in partnership with well over 230 communities across Canada. So the program is quite large in scope. We've had thousands of members graduate and been able to take the knowledge that they've gained with the programs and continue on to gain meaningful employment in this climate change, energy management, and very diverse environmental space. So we just wanted to provide an opportunity to provide you guys some information on BEAR and also just show one tiny avenue on a way in which you can collaborate in this Western science and Indigenous knowledge framework in a meaningful way. And I just want to wrap everything up with a huge thank you and pass it over to Brad. I'd love to open the stage up for some questions back to our participants and our panelists.
Hello, Corey.
Hi.
Hi, can I just add something else?
Please.
Yeah, while we're waiting for questions here, I just want to mention, thank you for the discussion. And honestly, what we're talking about is definitely a gap that has been addressed. And I'm very happy and fortunate that I have a partner where we did create a group that actually addresses this this conversation that we're talking about building relationships, about building partnerships. I'm very happy our group, Summit Indigenous Ventures, we just did a media release yesterday. I'm going to be working with the town of Kalmar to look at their abandoned oil and gas wells and possibly do a feasibility to potentially turn those over to geothermal and work alongside with creating a solar program to cultivate energy for the town of Kalmar. So that's very exciting for us. And the work we're doing just shows, that this can be done. You put the right mechanisms in place. These type of work can be done. These type of partnerships can happen. So I'm very excited about the town of Kalmar and Summit Indigenous Ventures. And I'm looking forward as this project comes to fruition. And I hope it inspires other communities to actually look at these type of partnerships with First Nations in developing these type of programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'd just like to add some words of what I heard and which hit me were respect, community, partnership, relationships, and collaboration. I think those are all extremely important when we talk about any of these topics. I think it's so important. I also heard something yesterday during the inauguration that Joe Biden said from his mom's wisdom, and I think it's very timely. I think it's important, is that we should all take a moment, even if it's a small moment, and stand in someone else's shoes and learn from that. Listen and learn. So I appreciate this conversation. So some questions, there's a few, some are lengthy, so we'll try to get through what we can. So anyone that feels free to jump in, please do. What are unique socioeconomic opportunities that can emerge with collaboration projects between Indigenous communities, industry, and government, and how can we support youth to improve their work futures?
To answer these, why don't we provide both panelists an opportunity to speak if you guys are comfortable on that, if you're comfortable.
Okay. Paul, do you want to go ahead, or do you want me to?
You go first. You're like the best to follow up because you say all the cool stuff, and then I just say something that just basically rephrases everything Desmond says. So that's kind of how I pulled it off so far.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I should have included this in part of the conversation. I had it written in my notes, but I honestly believe the best place to start is education. We need to really work on our how we want to teach curriculum, not only in First Nation communities, but in municipalities. Teach the proper history of how First Nations people really are. Whether it's that territory, whether it be Cree or Métis or Blackfoot, it's each unique to its own area and territory. And I think that's where we need to begin that conversation, is start developing a proper curriculum program that works in elementary, junior high, that helps and transitions Canadian citizens and First Nations people to have that understanding that this country, we share together and no one's going anywhere. So we got to make the best of what we have and work within the agreements that are in place. Like I said, the treaty, the TRC, the UNDRIP, these are perfect foundations on which we can start doing the collaboration and doing the work on. And like I said, I already proved the work can be done. I'm always one to get out there and try to do my best, even if I falter. But you can't gain experience if you don't get out there and take the risk. And for me, I think that's one of the biggest risks we need to take as Canadian citizens and as First Nations people alike, is work on those foundations in place and start developing that conversation, very similar to what we're having here. Thank you.
And the only comment I'll make, I'll use three words. I'll use the words hope, opportunity, and pride. And with hope is, I think that using exactly what you discussed is using knowledge, partnership, relationships, and looking at youth involvement and using our elders and using science and cooperation communication, we can create hope. Am I scared of climate change? I have hope that we can solve this problem. Opportunity, I think that the critical thing is, I think that youth need to realize and communities need to realize what opportunities are available. And as Desmond said, we need to think outside the box. I think the opportunities that may exist, we don't even know what they are yet. But the only way to create them is actually working together. And I think the final word is pride. And I think that we need to actually start talking about being proud of the communities, being proud of the relationships we're addressing. And not ignoring our past. And as Desmond's alluding to, we need to, in order for us to move forward, to create hope, opportunity, and pride, we need to recognize and realize our past too as well. And I think that if we look at those three words and we design how we approach this, I think we can actually create a future that I think will have hope, opportunity, and it's something that we can all be proud of.
Could I just elaborate on that last point? My good friend Holly Fortier from Fort McKay, her uncle David Boucher said this, and we use this in her trainings. We use this. I bring this forward when we talk about opportunity. Success breeds success. Define success. People could define their own success as wealth. Could be their family. Could be their health. Everyone has their own definition of that success. But guaranteed in your lifetime, someone believed in you and gave you that opportunity. Who's it going to be for these youth, the next generations? Who's going to give them the opportunity? And just to sum up what Paul and Desmond said exactly so beautifully, it starts by that initial engagement, that education, the raising all of or bringing that awareness to these, having these conversations, all of this, but we need to provide the opportunity. We cannot just talk about the opportunity. And that's where I say success breeds success. Who's going to be that? Who's going to be and give that next opportunity for the next generations? So, thank you. Just wanted to add that.
Great, thanks everyone. Has there been any projects using carbon sequestration via eco restoration, tree, shrub planting, wetland restoration?
I can jump in and talk a little bit about that. I'm having conversations at the federal level. So nature-based solutions is really one of the main drivers of climate change response by the federal government. And exactly what you're talking about is sequestration. And it sounds so obvious, I think, to Indigenous communities, but the fact is that our grasslands are a fantastic carbon engine. The fact is that we can actually, by having restoration of wetlands and grasslands, we can start to change that mass balance equation on carbon emissions. And so you're starting to see this nature-based solution really moving forward in these discussions as it relates to climate change response. And so, and actually some of the Indigenous knowledge is tremendous in this topic. And I think there's been projects that I think actually Kainai's undertaken a few projects. I know the Piikani Nation has discussed looking at ecosystem goods and services and looking at some provisions of that. So I think there's some fantastic opportunities, again, using restoration, using carbon sequestration, using planting and management activities as to change that mass balance equation, that balance between carbon emissions and carbon sequestration. So I do think if you key in on nature-based solutions and look for some of the federal programs, I think there's a tremendous opportunity there that can be leveraged by Indigenous communities and all the folks that are on this webinar today.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a. Yep. Sorry. Thank you, Paul, for that comment. That is really great here, and I really believe also that First Nations people, with that interconnection they have to land and Mother Earth is very important. But also, if we do want to address how we want to look at these type of carbon issues, I think first and foremost we need to start working on a proper reclamation and remediation. I mean, how can we have proper ecosystems when you have tens of thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells still in the ground, and how it affects those ecosystems, the water systems, the plants and vegetation. I mean, me as a First Nation and listening to my elders and our traditional people, it's getting more and more scarce to find those traditional plants. It's getting more and more scarce to find those medicines, and that's only because of industry development and no kind of cleanup or reclamation or ownership of the project after it's done. So I think that would be a perfect start there in regards to how we want to look at carbon and how we want to capture carbon. Also, I think there should be for me, this is just my thought. I'd like to see a shift move toward industrial hemp. I mean, that is an amazing plant. The multiple purpose that it uses in regards to cleaning the air, but also providing textiles, clothing, food subsidies. There is so much in regards to this plant and how it can actually save the agricultural and also work toward cleaning our air and cleaning the carbon out of the air. So, it goes back again to the traditional understanding and traditional teaching. I think just developing that connection and building that conversation, you'll gain so much in regards to developing that consultation with the elders and the traditional people, the plant gatherers, the berry pickers, the harvesters of wild game. I think the conversation needs to start there. And like I said, this is a good forum and a good place to start.
Great. Maybe Desmond, we'll start with you on this one. How do you think Indigenous protected conservation areas can play a role in climate change work?
Oh, that's a great question. And actually, this is something I'm trying to work on within my community. Like I said, I'm never one to reinvent the wheel. I always find inspiration outside. And I really found it was very inspired by the First Nations people within the United States, how they're actually creating their own national parks and conservation areas. And that's something I approach with my tribe with using one of our lands, which we can't develop because it has a very delicate ecosystem in place. So I approached the province and suggested, can we make this into one of the very first First Nation provincial parks in regards to conservation and protection? But we also wanted to include some bison in there also. So, you know, we have that opportunity, and we as First Nations have all this traditional and old territory that we used to be on. And I think moving forward, we need to develop more parks that have that interconnection to cultural sensitivity of the area, more interpretive centers, so to say, I guess, in regards to sharing that information. But definitely, I think, like I said, it begins with partnerships, collaborations, and beginning the conversation.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add one comment too, and I'm a huge fan of, you know, I think that we need to have carbon reduction. So we have emission reduction. We need to deal with that. I think we need to deal with using renewable energy and making that progress as well. And then you get to a critical point, and I'm a really huge fan of the conversation around ecosystem goods and services and offsets, where I think that this final step is actually using resources, enhancement, et cetera. And I think there's a real opportunity here when you get to that offset conversation. It's actually start looking exactly what Desmond is talking about, is actually Indigenous protected areas. And there's a funding stream there from an offset conversation where you're recognizing that natural space can actually mitigate and or be an offset to other emissions. And as I said, it needs to be an iterative process. I don't believe you should buy yourself out of pollution. But when you get to that last step, where that last little bit you need to address from a carbon emission standpoint, I think looking at offsets and ultimately looking at Indigenous protected areas is a really fantastic way to get to that final step. Because what comes with that is biodiversity. What comes with it is reconciliation, UNDRIP. What comes with that is the fact that we can actually look at medicines and we can have these climate change refugia that can deal with future biodiversity issues that we're having. So again, it's the last step. You should never buy yourself out of pollution, but I think there's an opportunity there.
Does everyone have time for a few more questions? Because there's a lot in the queue. If we can go maybe another 5 minutes or so, is that good with everyone?
I'm fine with another 5 minutes.
Okay. When launching a program that will bring Indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge together, how would you advise getting started with the Indigenous community? And then along that, there's another question. Someone's really interested in getting involved and helping out. Wanted to know if it's acceptable to reach out to the presenters and the panelists.
Go ahead, Paul, if you want to get that one first.
Well, I think that the first step is I mean, there's a history of first of all, you got to understand the history. There's a history of folks coming in and telling Indigenous communities what's going to happen, where you can go, and what you can do. So I think that the first step is understanding and learning and education. And you don't want to have this situation where you show up and say, and the nation has to say, well, what do you want? The only reason why you're talking to me is because you want something. And instead, it's like, you know what I want is I want to actually get to know your community. What I want to do is start to share the knowledge and see what opportunities that we have. I think that's the first step. And I think that I've had multiple conversations. There's like, well, what do you do? What should we do? And you know what? Ask. I mean, the worst thing you can do is get it wrong and someone will correct you. But I think you just got to have the ability to ask the questions and to be wrong and be prepared to be wrong and be prepared to learn and to have your ears open. Make sure you're listening and understanding. If you don't understand, ask a question and ask and learn. And I think that's maybe the first step to take. It sounds so complex. And I've had the privilege of working with Indigenous communities, and it's like we joke and how was your weekend? And you know, people are people too. And you can't forget that too as well.
Okay, awesome, Paul. You know, like I said, I'll harp on this all the time, and I believe honestly what you said It starts at the education. It starts at curriculum development. It starts learning the history. You know, at the end of the day, if Canadian citizens have a better understanding of who we are as First Nations people, it goes a lot further. You know, when you have empathy with what is going on with First Nations. Because for me personally, I don't want somebody's sympathy. I want the empathy. I want to know the struggles that my ancestors had, and it goes back to that education. And also, I think you know, we got to look at how we want to do cultural sensitivity. Whether it be in the industry, whether it be in government, you know, there not only First Nations people, there's a lot of minorities in this country also, and I think there has to be some sort of way that cultural sensitivity training should be mandatory within this country, within any type of employment, whether it be retail or governance or you know, private businesses. I think that goes so much further. You know, and those community partnerships, you know, I think right now, I think what's happening in Maskwacis and them being able to work more closely with the surrounding municipalities is very positive. But maybe going a lot further, I think maybe even just creating some sort of a committee or maybe some sort of a board, you know, collectively within that municipality and First Nations to address these at that level, and then bring them to the leaderships at on those municipalities or those First Nation communities, so we can get, you know, some sort of get that conversation started. So maybe that might be a good start in developing those type of community initiatives where a board or a committee can be formed and start getting that conversation going there. And I think it can snowball into where education can be impacted, you know, where it could start at elementary, junior high, high school, post-secondary, you know, but at the end, you know, it's those first steps we need to take first. There's no reward with no risk.
I think we have time for two more, so we'll make them quick. First one, I work for an oil and gas company. What are some ways I can help employees access educational opportunities to learn more about the Indigenous community and viewpoints, and how to include Indigenous voices in our decision-making process?
Like with any industry, it goes back to what I had said, you know, create some sort of cultural sensitivity training that includes the understanding of the people where that project may be. If it may be in a Cree territory, Métis territory, Blackfoot territory. I think, you know, just reaching out. There's nothing wrong with reaching out and starting those conversations. And I think it goes back to the approach of how you want to approach First Nations. You know, there is a process in regards to duly consult. You know, we don't want somebody just coming in there bulldozing, you know, and saying this is how it should be done. You know, lay your cards down on the table. This is what we're having a problem with. How can we work collectively toward fixing the solution? You know, it's better to approach with an open mind and have the feedback, and also take in criticism also in regards to where to go. But until you begin those conversations, until you can actually sit down and say, this is what we need, this is what we could use. You know, there's a lot of resources out there that can actually help. Within Alberta, there are 6 post-secondary First Nation institutions, all the way up from St. Paul, all the way to Siksika. I'm sure those would be great resources to reach out, where they have elders and cultural advisors and curriculum development based around the history of that, the area of those people also. So maybe that would be a good start there, you know, is to work with and even talk with the post-secondary institutions within Alberta that are First Nation, and I believe that would be a good start. But also, you know, there's other groups also out there. I can't name a lot of them. One of them might be the Nietzsche Institution up in Edmonton. I know there's a few more down in Calgary. You know, it's getting out there in regards to doing the work. And like I said, the work I have already done in regards to creating that group, we're addressing this issue of how to create those partnerships. And that's one of the main mandates of the group I work with. My partner is developing and making sure that these conversations begin and continue. But not only just to work on one project, but to look at long-standing partnerships that'll last, you know, generations. You know, that's one of the beautiful things about renewable energies, especially solar, is, you know, these type of projects will last for decades. You know, they'll be here after I'm done. My kids will actually enjoy the cultivation of that energy type of project also. So these type of things are generational, and I think building that conversation and just reaching out to the proper people is a great start.
My only follow-up comment is that I'll direct anybody that hasn't looked at the Truth and Reconciliation, so the TRC. If you haven't looked at the reconciliation and the calls to action, I recommend anybody that's working in Alberta, and any Canadian that hasn't looked at that, I think you need to, as well as be aware of UNDRIP. I think that's your first step. I think you need to, and those are just words. So I think you need to understand and spend some energy, some personal energy seeking why that's occurred and why those exist. And I think that to me, that's the first step. And then the second step is I think the outreach. But and I think as any company that wants to begin these relationships, it has to be genuine too. And I'm not saying that it's not genuine, but it's got to be genuine. And you know, to be a good neighbor, it takes a bit of work. You know, so you can't just Nicky Nine Door, I always call it, where you pop in and say, hey, how's it going, and then never talk to the community again. So trust me, I've seen a lot of Nicky Nine Door in the environmental industry, and you know who you are, right? Dropping off big reports and running away. And so the fact is that I think that you need to have a genuine relationship. You need to foster and put some energy in, and to be a good neighbor. And again, what as Desmond has alluded to earlier, to honor treaty, because we're all treaty people.
Great point. Last question from a student. How do you start to collaborate based on an idea you think can be a benefit to a community?
Well, for me, you know, like the work I've been doing, we look at the gap in regards to what could be developed out there. You know, what are our neighbors doing? You know, there's so much opportunity in renewable energy and the energy efficiency sector. I think we just need a better way of finding, you know, what could benefit this community. You know, and that was the approach when we did the work with Calmar. We realized they had a lot of abandoned wells. We realized that their governing body wanted to actually work toward energy and renewable energy practices, and we were just neighbors with them, and it opened up that conversation. And with the work we already done in Musquecheese on the reclamation or remediation in Mamio Beach, you know, was kind of gave me the experience to develop those type of works. So you know, I think it's just based on the need and necessity. I mean, maybe down south, you know, geothermal won't work there, but definitely wind would work there. You know, I think it's just the approach of finding and filling a need that is needed within a community. But not only the renewable energy sector, I think we got to start looking and diversifying how we want to do environmental stewardship, and that includes, like I said, water protection, food sovereignty programs, waste management. There's so much that we can all work collectively together to improve this country, our community. And like I said, the foundation is already there, and it's within our treaty, it's within the TRC, it's within the UNDRIP. Thank you.
I know I'm a politician, and I know there's a cliche of politicians, but Desmond answered that question perfectly. And I will not add to that, because although I like to hear my own voice as a politician, I cannot improve upon what Mr. Bull had said.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brad and Desmond, Paul, Corey, Eco Canada, and Bear for approaching ESA to put this on. Really appreciate this. A recording of the webinar will be available later today at esa.org/webinars. So look for it there. Feel free to drop me an email if you can't find it. I'll have it up hopefully later tonight. Watch for more webinars coming soon. Our next one should be in about 2 weeks, and it's going to be on a topic I think is very important. It's not related to work and what we do. It's about mental health. And with everything going on, I think it's good we have a chance to have a chat about mental health and know that there's help out there for anyone who's suffering or you need someone to talk to or whatever. So it's just going to be some tips and some strategies to help you get through some tough times, and then we'll do a follow-up one in a month on motivation and stuff like that. Just something different that hopefully help people. So with that, I'm going to leave everyone again with those key words that I picked up: respect, community, partnerships, relationship, and collaboration. And wish everyone the best and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Bye-bye.